All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most heated debates in all of economics, fiscal policy. We're talking about how the government uses its power to tax and spend to steer the economy. And trust me, this isn't just some abstract theory. It's a battle of ideas that shapes our jobs, our savings, and our future. And this quote right here, it just nails the core of the problem. For decades, this is the question that's been at the heart of it all. Is government debt a huge, scary monster about to break down the door, or is it something quieter, a slow, creeping problem that's eating away at our foundation when we're not looking? How you answer that pretty much defines your whole philosophy. And believe me, this isn't just some dusty old textbook debate. After the financial crisis hit in 2007, this whole argument exploded into the mainstream. Just look at this chart. The U.S. deficit, as a chunk of the entire economy, basically quadrupled in just a few years. That massive jump pushed this debate out of the ivory tower and straight onto the political main stage. So to really get a handle on this, we've got to look at it from two angles. First, we'll talk about the ideal, what fiscal policy is supposed to do in a perfect world. And then we're going to get into the messy, complicated world of what it actually does. Okay, so in theory, everybody wants the same thing, right? The textbook goals of fiscal policy are pretty straightforward. Keep unemployment low, make sure prices are stable, and help the economy grow. The whole idea is to use these government tools to make life better for everyone. Sounds great. But here's the twist. What if the people pulling the levers have their own goals? A whole field of economics, public choice theory, asks this very uncomfortable question. What if what's best for society isn't really the number one priority? And this slide really lays out that conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got this idea of the social planner, this selfless public servant who's only trying to do what's best for the country. But on the other side, you've got the political actor who might be more focused on, winning elections and pushing a party agenda. And that leads us straight into this idea called the public choice view. It's a pretty cynical take, but it's also really powerful. It basically says that politicians are people, and like most people, they're driven by self-interest. And for a politician, what's the ultimate self-interest? It's getting reelected. Now, if you follow that logic, it leads to some predictable and kind of worrying outcomes. First, you get what's called political business cycles. That's when the economy suddenly seems to be booming right before an election. Surprise, surprise. Then there's an inflationary bias, because let's face it, voters notice when they lose their jobs way more than they notice slowly rising prices. And the big one is a deficit bias. Think about it. Spending money on projects wins votes. Raising taxes to pay for those projects, not so much. So it's a lot easier to just borrow the money and let someone else deal with the debt later. Now, there's another theory, kind of similar, called the partisan theory. It agrees that politics drives everything, but it says it's less about individual politicians trying to get reelected and more about deep-seated party ideologies. Maybe one party consistently prioritizes fighting unemployment, while the other is always focused on keeping inflation low. This creates these big party cycles where economic policy can swing wildly every time a new party takes over. But hold on, that's only one side of the story. Now, we need to talk about the powerful argument for giving policymakers flexibility, the Keynesian view. This is the idea that fiscal policy needs to be the economy's shock absorber. And the key idea here is something called automatic stabilizers. Honestly, the best way to think about them is like the suspension system in your car. They're parts of our tax and welfare systems that are already built in, and they automatically help smooth out the bumps in the economic road without Congress having to pass a single new law. So let's walk through it. Say the economy hits a rough patch. People start earning less, so the government automatically collects less in taxes. At the exact same time, more people might lose their jobs and become eligible for unemployment benefits, so government spending automatically goes up. The result? It puts a little more money back into the economy right when it's needed most, cushioning the fall. It all happens automatically. And this is the core of the Keynesian argument. They say that if you create a rigid rule, like forcing the government to balance its budget every single year, you'd completely destroy these automatic stabilizers. It would be like ripping the suspension out of your car and then trying to drive down a rocky road. It would force the government to cut spending or raise taxes during a recession, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do. Okay, so this raises a really important question. If deficits aren't always evil, how do we tell the difference between a good deficit and a bad one? Well, to do that, you have to pop the hood on the big deficit number and see what it's made of. And here's the tool economists use. They split the total deficit into two parts. You've got the cyclical deficit, which you can think of as the good part. That's just the automatic stabilizers doing their job in a recession. But then you have the structural deficit. That's the part you really have to watch, because it's the deficit that would still be there even if the economy was running at full steam. It reflects long-term choices about taxes and spending. So let's look at the numbers right after the crisis. In 2009, the total deficit was a mind-boggling $1.4 trillion. But when we break it down, you can see that about $312 billion of that was the cyclical part, the automatic stabilizers kicking in to help. The rest, a massive $1.1 trillion, was the structural part. That was the result of deliberate policy choices, like the huge stimulus package, on top of the tax and spending laws that were already on the books. All right, so let's zoom out and see how this whole ideological battle has actually shaped policy in the real world. This tug of war between rules and discretion has defined American economics for decades. I mean, it's really been like watching a pendulum swing back and forth. In the 80s, you had the Reagan tax cuts and a big defense buildup, which created huge structural deficits. Then in the 90s, the pendulum swung completely the other way under Clinton. Tax hikes, spending cuts, and a booming economy actually led to surpluses. Then, back again in the 2000s, with the Bush tax cuts, we went right back to structural deficits. And finally, that massive Keynesian response to the 2008 crisis, the era stimulus in 2009. And that brings us right up to the present day. The fight is exactly the same. It's just that the numbers have gotten a whole lot bigger. You still hear loud calls for spending cuts and balanced budget rules, right alongside passionate arguments that all that stimulus spending was the only thing that saved us from another Great Depression. And look, the stakes here are just massive. The real challenge is the future. Some projections show that with the rising costs of things like healthcare, our national debt could soar to 175% of our entire economy's output by 2035. That's a staggering number. Getting this right isn't just a political game, it's an absolute necessity. So that's the fundamental question we're left with. As we look ahead, what's the answer? Should we tie policymakers' hands with strict rules to keep our debt in check? Or do we need to give them the freedom and flexibility to fight the next inevitable crisis? There is no easy answer here, and this great debate is going to be with us for a long, long time.